All right, so we left off talking about battle formations, and we're going to continue on. We're in book 2 out of 7. So we're getting deep into it at this point. So, I'm saying, let's continue on and, see where we get to. The files, therefore, being brought into this arrangement and desired by marching to bring them in the company to form the head, you have to cause the first centurion to stop with the first file of 20, and the second to continue to march. And turning to the right hand, he goes along the flanks of the 20 stop files, so that he comes head to head with the other centurion, where he too stops, and the third centurion continues to march. Also, turning to the right hand, then marches along the flanks of the stop file, so that he comes head to head with the other two centurions, and when he also stops, the other centurion follows with his file, also going to the right along the flanks of the stop file, so that he arrives at the head of the front with the others, and then he stops, and the two centurions who are alone quickly depart from the front and go to the rear of the company, which becomes formed in that manner, and those orders to the point which we showed a little while ago. The veleti extend themselves along its flanks according to as they were disposed in the first method, which method is called doubling by the straight line, and the last is a method called doubling by the flanks. The first method is easier, while the latter is better organized and is more adaptable, and you can be more controlled by you, for it must be carried out by numbers. From that from 5 you make 10, from 10 make 20, 20 40, and so by doubling at your direction you cannot make a front of 15 or 25 or 30 or 35, but you must proceed to where the number is less. And yet every day it happened in particular situations that you must make a front with 600 or 800 infantry, so that doubling the straight line will disarrange you. Yet this latter method pleases me more, and what difficulty may exist can be more easily overcome by the proper exercise and practice of it. I say to you, therefore, that it is more important than anything to have soldiers who know how to form themselves quickly, and it is necessary in holding them in these companies to train them thoroughly and have them proceed bravely forward or backwards, to pass through difficult places without disturbing the order. For the soldiers who know how to do this well are experienced soldiers, and although they may have never met the enemy face to face, they can be called seasoned soldiers. And on that contrary, those who do not know how to maintain this order, even if they may have been in 1,000 wars, ought always to be considered as new soldiers. So what he's basically saying here, right, is that drill and knowing what your position is more important than actually knowing how to fight, right? It's kind of like if somebody's a really good street fighter, it doesn't mean he's going to be a good boxer. All right, because like the boxer knows the rules, knows how to move, knows how to take the angles, where the street fighter's just a brawler and can just get the job done. Now, they both are looking to perform the same task, right? But one will do it much better than the other one with more efficiency and won't get hit as much and loses often as the individual who's more wild, is kind of the situation. Now, this applies in forming them when they are marching in small files, but if they are formed and then become broken because of some accident that results either from the location or from the enemy, to reorganize themselves immediately is important and a difficult thing in which much training and practice is needed, and in which the ancient placed much emphasis. It is necessary, therefore, to do two things. First, to have many countersigns in the company, right? Which means you want to have a lot of individuals out here giving orders, who are capable of giving orders. Like, these are what countersigns would be an individual who kind of holds up a flag as to what you're supposed to be doing, right? So like you immediately know what the situation is and what's going on. It's kind of really where it's at, right? The other is to always keep this arrangement that the same infantries always remain in the same file. For instance, if one is commanded to be in second file, he will afterwards always stay there, and not only in the same file but in the same position in the file. It is to be observed, as I said, how necessary are the great number of countersigns, so that coming together with the companies, it may be organized by its own men. Secondly, that the constable and centurion have tufts of feathers on their heads, dressed different and recognizable. What is more important, to arrange the heads of 10 to be recognized, to which the ancients paid very much attention, that nothing else would do. But what they wrote numbers on their buckles, calling them the first, I lost my place a second, right? Calling them the first, second, third, fourth, etc. They were not above content with this, but each soldier had to write on the shield number of his file and the number of his place assigned to him in that file. The men, therefore, being thus countersigned, assigned and accustomed to staying within these limits, If they should become, or if they should be disorganized, it is easy to reorganize them all quickly. For if the flag stayed fixed, the centurions and heads of 10 can judge their place by eye and bring the left from the right and the right from the left, with usual distances between the infantry guided by their rules, and the difference in countersigns can quickly take their proper places, just as if the staves of the barrel which you had first countersigned. It's kind of like it's like picking up a man on defense in football or basketball. Like, no matter what an individual does, you know what I'm saying? Like, you should know your position and where you're supposed to be at on the field, like, no matter what happens. And as long as you have the individuals around you, like in particular, like on an offensive line in football or something, you'll know where your position's supposed to be, even if you're kind of out of it. It's kind of the situation. Like, you should always know what you're supposed to be doing. And if you're not, somebody else will, tell you, yo, this is where we're supposed to be at. That way you're all lining up properly. Like, these are really important things. You know what I'm saying? This system, with diligence and practice, can be taught quickly and be quickly learned, and once learned are forgotten with difficulty. For new men are guided by the old, and in time of province which has such training will become entirely expert in war. It is also necessary to teach them to turn in step, and do so when he should turn from the flanks and by the soldiers in front, and from the front flanks of the shoulders rear. This is very easy, for it is sufficient only that each man turns his body towards the side he is commanded to, and in the direction which they turn becomes the front. It is true that when they turn by the flank, the ranks which turn go outside of their usual area, because there is a small space between the breasts of the shoulders, while from one flank the other there is much space, which is all contrary to the regular formation of the company. Hence, care should be used in employing it, but it is more important, and where practice is needed, when a company wants to turn entirely, if it was a solid body. Here, great care and practice must be employed. If it is desired to turn left, for instance, it is necessary to the left wing be halted, and those who are closer to the halted one march much slower than those who are in the right wing and have to run. Otherwise, everything will be in confusion. Yeah, that's kind of like tires on a car. Believe it or not, your inside tire, right, will turn faster than your outside tire, right? Which is why, like, a lot of cars can't be towed. You know what I mean? Like, if you have your wheels on the ground, they'll end up, you know what I mean? Like, when it turns, it'll end up, like, throwing off the balance of the car. That's why, like, certain parts of the car will end up, having more wear than others. Like, it's kind of about that. And that's why, like, you should never put a donut on your front tires. You should put them on the back, right? Because you can drag the donut to where it needs to go to. But, like, the front tires are a different situation. And if you make a backwards turn, right, if you turn backwards in a car, you'll end up having the two wheels go two different directions, which is, what I'm saying, like, this is a physics movement at the same point. It's pretty cool, right? But as it always happens when an army marches from place to place, if the company's not situated in front, not having to combat to the front or the flanks or the shoulders or rear, had to move from the flank or shoulder quickly to the front. And when such companies in such cases had the space necessary, as we indicated above, it is necessary the pikemen they have on the flank become the front, and the heads of the 10 centurions and constables belonging to relocate to their proper places. Therefore, in wanting to do this, when forming them, it is necessary to arrange the 80 files of 5 per file, placing all the pikemen in the first 20 files, and placing 5 heads of 10 of it in front of them, and then having the 5 to the rear. The other 60 files situated behind all the shield bearers, who total to 300. It should therefore be arranged that the first and the last file of every 100 of the heads of 10, the constable with his flag and bugle would be in the middle of the first 100 century of shield bearers, and the centurions at the head of every century. Thus arranged, when you want the pikemen to be on the left flank, you have to double them century by century from the right flank. If you want them to be on the right flank, you have to double them from the left. And thus this company turns with the pikemen to the flank, and with the heads of 10 to the front and the rear, with the centurions at the front of them and the constables in the middle, which formation holds when going forward. When the enemy comes in the time for the companies to move from the flank to the front, it cannot be done unless all the soldiers face towards the flank where the pikemen are. And then the company is turned with its files and heads in the manner that was described above. And for the centurions being on the outside, all the men in their places, the centurions quickly enter them into the ranks without difficulty. So when they're marching forwards, and have to combat the rear, they must arrange the files so that in forming the company and the pikes are situated in the rear. And to do this, no other order has to be maintained, except that where the formation of the company ordinarily Every century has 5 piles of pikemen in front of it, and it has them behind, but in all of our observe the order that I have mentioned. So kind of where he's going with this, he said, look, you should know if you're going to turn beforehand, right? Like in your battle plans. That way you can set your troops up so that the heads of your troops are at the front when you make your turn. You know what I mean? Like you lean them heavy on one side. And that way, when you turn, they immediately turn, and their centurions and everybody and the leaders are in the front of your troops, and you don't have to worry about them becoming in place and having them put their men back into the ranks where they belong. So, back to Cosimo. You have said, if I remember well, that this method of training is to enable them to form these companies into an army, and that the training serves and enable them to be arranged within it. But what should occur at these 450 infantry had to operate as a separate party? How would you arrange them? Fabrizio, I will now guide you in judging where he wants to place the pikes and who should carry them, which is not in any way contrary to the argument mentioned above, for although it may be the method that is observed when together with the companies it comes to an engagement, nonetheless it is the rule that serves for all methods in which it should happen, and that you have to manage it. But in showing you the other 2 methods for arranging the companies proposed by me, I will also better satisfy your question, for either they are never used, or they are used when the company is above, and then when not in the company of others. So basically, he said you're going to pick a fucking system and stick with it. You know, I mean, you don't want like guys, especially, you know, like people who are coming from the country, they're probably not really literate. They're not the most intelligent individuals. You know, I mean, super strong people tend to not be the smartest of your, you know, I mean, people. Like, you don't want to have them, you know, I mean, standing here like trying to judge what they're supposed to do on their own and remember a whole bunch of different ranks and files and shit of this nature. It just makes life difficult. It's much easier when you have shit simple. The simplest way of doing things is usually the best. And to come to the method of forming it with 2 horn wings, I say that you ought to arrange the 80 files of the 5 per file in this way. Place a centurion in the middle, and behind him 25 files that have 2 pikemen on each on the left side and 3 shield bearers on the right. And after the first 5 and the next 20 heads of 10 be placed, all between the pikemen and shield bearers, except that those heads who carry pikes stay with the pikemen. Behind these 25 files, thus arranged, another centurion is placed who has 15 files of shield bearers behind him. After these, the constable between the flag and the bugler who is behind him, 15 files of shield bearers. The 3rd centurion is placed behind these, and he has 25 files behind him, and each of which are 3 shield bearers on the left side and 2 pikemen on the right. After the first 5 files are 20 heads of 10 placed between the pikemen and the shield bearers. After these files, there is 4th centurion, which is, if it is desired, therefore, to arrange these files to form a company with 2 horns, wings, with the 1st centurion, it has to be halted with the 25 files which are behind him. The 2nd centurion then has to be moved with the 15 shield bearers who are on his rear, and returning to the right and on the right flank of the 25 files, proceed so far that when he comes to the 15 files and where he halts. Basically, what this is a circling maneuver. This is like if you're facing somebody small. Right, if you're facing a smaller army that you want to like encapsulate, so that you have people on the outside that you can just, you know, I mean, kind of loop around, or, you know, I mean, that you have the ability to stand here and have wider flanks on the outside if you're facing an enemy who's, you know, I mean, lined up wider. You know, I mean, like, I guess it's kind of like if you're facing somebody who does this a lot, or a larger army or a smaller army is kind of the situation. Like, so it kind of depends on who you're fighting. Like, historically, you know what I mean? Like, who's your main threat as to which one of these you're going to use. It's kind of the deal. And, you know what I mean? Like, really who the strength is in your captains. You know what I mean? That's really what this boils down to. So, after the constable, after you move with 15 files of shield bearers. After the constable has to be moved with the 15 files of shield bearers who are behind, and turning around towards the right, or by the right flank of the 15 files which are moved first, marches so that he comes to their front where he halts. After the move, the 3rd centurion with 25 files with the 4th centurion who is behind him, turning to the right, march by the left flank of the last 15 files of shield bearers. He does not halt until he's at the head of them, but continues marching up until the last files of 25 are in line with the files behind. And having done this, the centurion who is the head of the first 15 files of shield bearers leaves the place where he was and goes to the rear at a left angle. And thus he will turn a company of 25 solid files of 25 infantry per files with 2 wings on each side of his front. and there will remain a space between them as much as would be occupied by 10 men side by side. The captain will be between the two wings, and the centurion in each corner of the wing. There will be 2 files of pikemen and 20 heads of 10 on each flank. These 2 wings serve to hold between them that artillery whenever the company has any with it, and the courages the Velidi has to stay along the flanks beneath the pikemen, but in wanting to bring the winged form company in the form of a piazza, a plaza, nothing else would need to be done than to take 8 of the 15 files of 20 per file and place them between the ports of the 2 wings, and from the wings become, and on top of that, this is an artillery move as well, right? This is so like you can put in like cannons or, trebuchets, right? Trebuchet, #trebuchet, motherfuckers, which is put either in front of the flanks. These are the methods which can be used by the company and has to pass by suspicious places by itself. Nonetheless, the solid company without wings and without the plaza is best, but in wanting to make the safe disarmed ones, that winged one is necessary. Anyway, right, so the Swiss also have many forms of companies, among which they one form of manner across in the spaces between they arm. They keep their gunners safe from the attacks of the enemy, but since such companies are good in fighting by themselves, and my intention is to show how several companies united together combat with the enemy, I do not belabor myself further in describing it. Cosmo, and it appears I may have very well comprehended the method that ought to be employed in training men in these companies, but if I remember well, you said in addition to the 10 companies of Italian, you add 1,000 extraordinary pikemen and 4,000 extraordinary Velidi. Would you not describe how to train these? All right. Fabrizio, I would, and with the greatest diligence. I would train the pikeman group at least in the formations of the companies, and as for the others, I would serve myself of the more than ordinary companies in all the particular actions, how to escort or raid and such things. But the Velidi I would train at home without bringing them together with the others, for as it is with their office to combat brokenly in the open separately, it is not as necessary that they come together with the others or to train in common exercises, and to train them well in particular exercises. They ought therefore, as I said in the beginning, and now it appears to be laboratories, to repeat it, to train their own men in these companies so that they know how to maintain their ranks, know their places, return there quickly when either the evening or the location disrupts them. For when this is caused to be done, they can easily be taught the place of the company, place the company has to hold, and what office should be in the armies. And if a prince or republic works hard and puts diligence in these formations and this training, it will always happen there will be good soldiers in that country, and they will be superior to their neighbors, and they will have those who give and not receive laws from other men. Yo, that's gangster. But as I have told you, the disorder in which one exists causes them to disregard and not esteem these things, and therefore our training is not good. And even if there should be some heads of members naturally of virtue, they are unable to demonstrate it. Yo, that's kind of beautiful, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, yo, that's, yeah, like, yo, when you're trained to serve your country, you know what I'm saying? And that's something you do when you're young. You know what I mean? When people are young, you put it into their head that that's what they're going to be. That's really beautiful. You know what I'm saying? And when they end up standing here being strong enough, they're the individuals who make the laws and not the people who have the laws forced upon them. I tell people this all the time, like, yo, I happen to life doesn't happen to me. And I think that's important. You know what I'm saying? Something we miss a lot of times. What carriages would you want each of these companies to have? Fabrizio, the first thing I would want is that the centurions and the heads of 10 should not go on horseback. And if the constables want to ride mountain, I would want them to have a mule and not a horse. I would permit them 2 carriages and 1 to each centurion, 2 to every 3 heads of 10. They would quarter so many in each encampment, as we will narrate in its proper place, so that each company would have 36 carriages, which I would have them to carry the necessary tents, cooking utensils, hatchets, digging bars, sufficient to make the encampment, and after that, anything else of convenience. Cosimo, I believe the heads assigned to you in each of these companies are necessary. Nonetheless, I would be apprehensive that so many commanders would be confusing. I'll tell you what, we're going to finish this paragraph off. They would be so if I would refer to one, but I refer to many. They make for order. Actually, without those orders, it would be impossible to control them. For a wall which inclines on every side would need many frequent supports, and even if they are not so strong, but if a few, they must be strong, for the virtue of only one, despite its pacing, can remedy any ruin. And so it must be in that in armies, among every 10 men, there is one of more life, of more heart, or at least more authority. Y'all niggas hate authority out here. Yo, but you know what I'm saying? I am the law, right? Who with his courage, with his words, and by example, keeps the other firm and disposed to fight. And these things mentioned by me as the heads of the flags, the buglers, are necessary in an army. And it is seen that we all have these in our present day army, but no one does his duty. First, the heads attend and desiring that those things be done because they are ordered. It is necessary. All right, look, man, we got to go over some of this, man. This shit's getting fucking long too. That's the bitch. Yo, he said, fucking, I refer to many they make for order. Actually, without those orders, it would be impossible to control them. For a wall which inclines on every side would need many and frequent supports. Even if they are not so strong, but if a few, they must be strong. For the virtue of only one, despite its spacing, can remedy any ruin. Yo, he said a good support beam will hold up the whole wall when all the rest of them are trying to tumble. Yo, that is fucking gangster, right? And he said, man, listen, even if they are not so strong, right? But if a few, they are strong for the virtue of only one, despite its spacing, can remedy any ruin. So it must be that in the armies and among every 10 men, there is one of more life, of more heart, of at least more authority, who with his courage, with his words, and by example, keeps the other firm and disposed to fight. Yo, we're going to leave that right there, bro. Y'all. You know the situation, man. This is Tom P's of Pnoid News. Yo, check that shit the fuck out. Peace.